Hey, this is Joe. Today, I'm going through my set of carbs from a 1979 Honda CBX. So I received the bike a couple weeks ago. The carburetors were in pieces, so I'm gonna go through them. I'm gonna do a complete clean. I'm gonna put new jets and everything in, and hopefully I'll be able to get them to a good spot because I want to put them on the bike once I'm done and then test them out, make sure that they're functioning properly. You never know the state of these carbs when you get them. There's not a lot of shops that work on these. It's more specialty folks. So I've gone through a set of carbs before for a Honda CBX. It was a little bit of a newer model. I'm familiar with the carbs, so I know how to take them apart and get them back together. So we'll go through that. So just taking another look at them before we take them apart. Took a couple pictures. I can use them as references. I'm trying to get them back together. So what I was checking out was the action of these. As you can see, right, these left ones looks like they're a little jammed up. So hopefully putting them through the ultrasonic cleaner will fix that. And then we'll just make sure that this spring is set up properly. The idle, it's a little difficult to move, so we probably want to grease it up, make sure that looks okay. I was looking through the top, it looks like one of these screws were stripped, so I'll have to remove that. You can see this is broken, so we'll probably just remove this. This was holding the drains for each one of the float bowls. Yeah, we'll just have to go through and take them apart. I'm still looking for anything that appears to be damaged. I think we're still okay right now. But obviously, right, as we get into them, we'll figure out what other things are wrong. Yeah, those are definitely grimy. Need to clean all of those up. Again, the ultrasonic cleaner will really help this stuff. So now the carb banks, right, have movement. That's good. So there's still some things attached that we need to get off here. So we need to separate these pieces here, and then we need to separate, I think these are okay as is. But yeah, we definitely need to separate that. All right. So there are some hex here, but they've got these little tabs. So you've got to push down these little tabs on both sides. That way you can unscrew each one of those. So we'll do that. This 8mm. Pretty sure these don't have to come out all the way. It's just enough to be able to get this out like that. Good. Fuel rail comes out. It's a little cotter pin right here that we need to remove. That'll allow us to remove this so that we can then separate. Some of these other fuel tubes are coming out now. This one's a really small cotter pin. And it's under tension. So we'll cotter pin off, take off stop washer and this spring. And then there's also, so pull this fuel rail out. Okay, this piece of plastic where the spring seats, pull that off. And then we can separate the banks. It also looks like there's another cotter pin that's in here. We'll just put one aside and we can work on this one. Okay, so this was just seated right there. Now this can come out easily. It's interesting. This is pretty gross. Bunch of hair all over this. So it'd be nice just to go and clean that. We just need to make sure we don't lose any of the bearings inside that are holding these together. It does look like there's a little collar or something on here that's broken. It may have been, yeah, it's this one little piece right here. Probably just to keep it in place so it doesn't rotate around. So I'm pretty sure in order to separate these, we need to remove all of these screws. So I can pull this out. This is a spring that we'll probably have to reset. The springs are okay. to be a little smoother. We're gonna have to take these out and then we can separate the banks, and we'll just have to remember where the fuel lines go. And then we can double check serial numbers just to make sure you use the right carbs. Always good to double check. You do have to make sure that when you are putting these back in, that each one of these valves opens and closes smoothly. You don't want them rubbing or hitting any side. So there is a little bit of play that you have when you go in there. Yeah, these screws do not look like one-time use screws. So I think we're okay. And I'm putting some pretty good pressure on these as I'm removing them because they are difficult to unscrew. Right, obviously you don't want the screws coming out when the engine's running. You don't want to risk them going into the cylinder. So I am putting pressure on them just to make sure I don't strip them. And then we should be able to pull this out from here. Didn't look like there was any tension on the spring, so we should probably fix that. So pull this off. We need to remove each of these. That piece is off. Should be able to pull these apart. Yep, one just have to remember there's a rubber connector in between each one of these. Right, you can see every one of these fuel tubes, right, could have gas leaking from them if these little O-rings go bad. So great idea to replace them all. Yeah, they haven't been apart in a long time. Right, so it looks like there was a spring in between these. Need to remember that. Here is the fuel tube. Another fuel tube. All right, well, yes, it is a good thing we're taking them apart. This will be good to get all of these things clean so that we know that there's no gunk inside of any of these passageways. So you can see this is an end. Right, you can see a little different. This one has looks like an accelerator pump on the side. So I believe that's what it is. You can see these are a little different. We'll just have to make sure that we assemble them back the way they're supposed to be, right? And then this is the middle. So now we can go through and we can do the same thing on this side. Unhook, and we're going to pull this out. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew the idle adjustment. So you can see here, and this is not moving well at all, but what the idle adjustment does, as you screw this in, you'll get to a certain point where it hits. Now you're slowly opening up those valves to let in more air. That's how you control your idle. So we'll pull this out. Go. All right, so you can see that this fuel line was bent. We'll have to see if we can potentially bend that back. If not, we may want to buy a new one. We really don't want these carbs leaking. Yeah, it does look like somebody grabbed these with a set of pliers. Okay, that spring looks good. That one came out too easily. Bet you. Yeah, looks like fuel was coming out of this one. So I'm sure it was leaking out of the carbs. Like that. I'm gonna leave this spring connected at least for now, but it looks like this is moving really slowly. So we'll pull this, This is the idle mixture screw. Yeah, so this has spring. There should be a gasket and a washer in there. The tricky part is you don't know if the person who did the carbs before even did this properly. So there we go. And now that's the little washer. This little metal washer. And there it is. So there's a little O-ring. It's pretty hard too. And then these will come in a carb rebuild kit, so you don't have to reuse them. And then, yeah, you can see how bad this looks. I mean, you can't even see through it. I mean, it is gunked up. So we do need to make sure we can get these out without damaging anything. And these jets I'll all replace. I mean, that's just, yeah, there's no anti-fuel was getting through that one. So that was probably the slow jet. I think this one is the main jet. So this is a 7mm. This is really, really difficult to remove. Right, like, you know, carbs like this are inoperable. Right, nothing's getting through that. Right, and a lot of times car rebuild kits come with new one of these as well. So at this point, this is ready for the ultrasonic cleaner. I don't typically strip them down any further than this before they go in. All right, those are all good. So going back to one of the fuel tubes. So this one has a bend in it. So it has a bend there, so that means it's not perfectly lined up. I was trying to see if I had any tools, like a punch or something, that was the same size so I could knock it through and potentially straighten it out. I'm gonna try using this screwdriver to see if I can do it. So I'm going to test it with my vise. And I need to hit down on that. That knocked out some of it. So we can try from this direction, see if this is any better. Okay, that went really well. Okay, that is looking pretty. It's looking pretty good. I know I did gouge the inside of that a little bit. I'm going to take a file to it, but I think this gets us back to a good spot. What I'll do is just try and smooth this out a little bit. Just make sure that's all good. All right, so there's a quick little fix. It looks like it's back to a good shape. All right, we shouldn't have to worry about that. So get out any metal shavings. So now we need to go through slides. So one thing I noticed is that the needles are not moving. Right, so what a lot of people do is they put a washer. So make sure you have a long, flat screwdriver. Right, so I'm gonna pull this out. And what you'll notice is there's a washer. Right, so this washer prevents the needle from moving around. So if we take that washer off, put it back in, and we tighten it down, right? So I think this is what the needle's actually supposed to do. You know, there are some kits that recommend you put that washer under it. In my experience, I haven't been able to get the bikes to run any better when I do that. So I usually take those washers off. It looks like these are all aftermarket needles because the needles don't have any markings on the top. I'll have to go through the bags and see if there's the OEM ones in there, but I know I did drop one of these earlier. It can bend the needles slightly and then you have issues as well. So I just want to make sure whatever needles I put in are not bent. And another thing on these slides, so sometimes with Dynajet, they ask you to drill these out to make them larger. It does not look like these have been drilled, at least from what I can tell. So that's good. So slides are in a good spot now. All of these are a little cruddy, so hopefully we can clean those up once it comes out. So I think that's everything. I had accelerator pump that I took off. You can see that this was all gunked up, so the spring and the diaphragm were actually jammed in there. So you can see this diaphragm is in here. All right, so I had to pull this out. And then I also had, there is an accelerator pump here. So I pulled this out. The other thing I had to pull out was, this was an O-ring. So I pulled out that O-ring, and that was this one. You can see this diaphragm was not in good shape, right? So it had these wrinkles in it, also had a hole in it, which means it's not gonna work properly. So, number of issues. I'm not surprised that the carb was having trouble, and that's why carb was off the bike. So next I need to grab all the pieces and I need to get the ultrasonic cleaner ready. So I set up the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm gonna run the carbs through it. I actually have to add some cleaning solution first. It's at 57 degrees Celsius. So it's right about, I think you want it at 55 to 60 degrees Celsius. That's what it says online. A little bit of this metalworking fluid. You don't need a lot. Mix it up real quick. Start putting parts in. You can see there's plenty that needs to be removed. The dirt and grime, I mean. The other thing that I forgot to mention in the video is right in the middle here is a little piece that you have to press out as well. These metal pieces, frame, I'll put them in as well. That's probably good for the first run. All right, so it's 55 degrees. I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. Okay, so it's been an hour. Took it out at the 30-minute mark and it was still dirty, so. What I'm doing is I'm dipping it in clean water. It's still warm water. And then I'm going to just scrub off as much as I can. This is sort of like the easiest time to get this stuff off. So it does clean up pretty nicely. I don't need them to be perfect. I just want them to be clean. I want them to work properly. A lot of this, you know, you're not going to see the inside of the carbs because they're mounted right next to each other. I want to make sure stuff like this is not getting stuck in there. All right, good to go through, clean all this up. I don't like a bunch of these mating surfaces. Yeah, you want to make sure you get everything off the best you can. And as long as it's not like old gasket, that should be okay. What's also good is to take Giles while doing this. Go through. This is at a good spot. All right, everything's out of the ultrasonic cleaner at this point. So now I just gotta wait for some of the carb parts to come in. I've got O-rings, I've got gaskets, I've got jets, I've got floats and pins. All of those are coming. All right, so I'm gonna work on getting the carbs back together now. So I have a bunch of the parts in that I was waiting for. So I worked with Tim CBX, I was working with Bill down there, old school carbs, and then I got stuff from Lewis, who's down in Florida. I buy a bunch of my parts from as well. So I think I've got everything I need. I know there were a couple like emulsion tubes that I needed to get off eBay, so those are in. I know it's gonna be a little tricky because there's so many parts, but I gotta get everything back together, make sure we don't have any leaks, and there's still some cleanup that I have to do on some of these carbs. This is probably because I left it in the ultrasonic cleaner a little too long, so I should be able to get this stuff out with sandpaper and the steel wool. So some of the things that I had to order because they were missing, I needed these floats and float pins. So this is what raises up inside of the float bowl. So when this fills up with fuel, this raises up and then cuts it off so no more fuel goes in, so you don't have fuel leaking all over the place. I needed a couple of these. This is just around the top of the slide. And then a couple of these plastic things keep the slide from rotating as they come down. I also got a jetting kit, so it looks like these are stage 3 jets. I had these custom made, so this is also from Tim CBX. Bill said he custom makes these now because the old Keihin that used to be made for the CBX, it was a batch of 3, so cylinder 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. So what he did instead was he took the stock airbox and then attached it to the Keihin filters. So he sent me jetting that hopefully should work with this. I think it's the DynoJet kit from the look of it, because all of them have that DJ on it. I'm not going to drill the slides, which is typically what they recommend when you do this. I really don't like, drilling, making changes like that. Hopefully these jets will all work properly for the exhaust and the intakes that I have now. I also bought a couple other things like a nice Pingle fuel petcock, and it's got a really nice wire mesh filter, it looks like. Looks like I got an oil filter, and then I know I've got a set of O-rings and everything here. And then I bought a tool set as well, just so I've got the correct screwdriver bits and everything as I'm working on the carb, so I'm not stripping any of the screws. All right, get into it. Yes, and this was from old school carbs, so this is all the O-rings, new screws, diaphragms. So this is really the main thing that I needed, especially if somebody else has rebuilt these before. If they use the kits that don't have the nice gaskets, I think it's called like Viton, if they don't use those, once the gaskets get submerged in gas, they'll actually expand so that they won't fit back in, and you do need a good seal around the gaskets, or else, right, you can have fuel leaking, and that's just a pain because it runs all over your engine. These are good quality, so it'll be nice to put the car back together and know that we're in a good spot. And then also, this is really nice, a bunch of these sleeves that go on these, because you can see these are all ripped up. So I got a bunch of these sleeves as well. So should be everything I need. This is the first time I bought like all quality parts for a carb rebuild. I have bought those cheaper sets and they worked really well for me, but I figure if I'm gonna be rebuilding this, 6 carbs, I don't really know the state of this because it wasn't running when I bought it, right? These carbs were apart. This will give us the confidence when we put it back together that we know at least the parts are solid and we don't have failures on them, because right, any one of these parts could fail and then you have issues, and then you have to take the whole thing apart, and you don't want to be chasing demons when you're trying to get the bike to run. All right, so it looks like I have 2 spares. I'll keep my eyes open for where this should go, if they're supposed to go somewhere. Could be extras, maybe. And then I'll just mark this as extra, so I know that I already went through these parts. All right, so this should go there. This will go here. This O-ring will go down here. That, double check, those look good. And we need to make sure that this is clear, so I'm gonna blow air through it. So let's put all new sleeves on these. So it looks like these just slide off. And then let's clean up this a little bit better. And put the new sleeves on. Now we gotta make sure we have all the pieces that are gonna go in to the banks as we start putting them together. It's gonna go there. And this is going to go there. So before I do that, I'm just going to clean each one of these passageways a little bit. I know I ran it through the ultrasonic cleaner, but it didn't do the best job, so I'm just gonna do this real quick. So we really wanna make sure we got a good seal, so we've got no leaks. Any residue in there could, prevent it from sealing real well. I'm pretty sure that spring I can slide in after the fact, but let's see if we can get everything to line up. And then the tricky part is where these two need to go together. So yeah, the hard part is you need to lift this up. You basically need to separate these like this. Like that. And at this point, everything appears to be lined up. Make sure this goes in between there. And then make sure we can push everything else together. Hold this in as well. And then we'll get a spring between like that. Well, that feels really good. Looks like everything's in. Cool. Yeah. Okay. That's close. All right, let's get the other side together. Okay. All right, so next we'll need to get this rod through, because these hold each of these plates, and there is a spring that's required to go around. The rods are 2 different lengths. You can tell just by inserting it if it's the right length or not. So we're gonna insert this all the way, and you can see they all line up where they're supposed to be. So this is the correct rod, and I'm gonna grab one of the springs. I'm gonna rotate the spring up and around, and I'm holding the spring, because you should get it to a point where this spring just rests up against, and then I'm gonna move the spring itself up and over this little ledge. So that should be all you need. I don't think you have to wind it any more than that. What you can see is the spring's got a little bit of tension here. Just gonna do a little WD on these springs. Right here. Just move them a little bit. Make sure everything looks good. I'm still holding it in, because it'll pop out. We got nothing holding this right now. But looks like so it looks like this. So that should be all we need. Now we can go and screw these throttle plates back on. And I'll wait to tighten these down until everything's bolted back together, because I want to make sure these all move smoothly. So now we can do the same thing to the other side. Okay. Looks good. All right, so next we got to get these back on. These should face this way. So what we have to do is screw these a bit, and we have to fasten these. So let's try getting the first one on here. Good. Try getting the other one on here. Okay, that's good. You can see how that moves. So next we'll get these rails on. Now a couple of these screws are a little bit longer, so it should be 2 on each side, the 4 in the middle essentially. So I'm gonna put accelerator pump rod through that. Okay, that looks good. Now let's bolt these together. Nice little test. Okay, good enough for right now. Good, that'll keep everything off the accelerator pump. Now let's tighten these 2. Yep, it's an 8. use on these either. This sits down there. That sits there. Washer. This tiny little cotter pin. Looks like all 6 are working. All right, let's get some of these other screws in, and then I can see if there's pieces left over that should be there. I'll put these longer screws in. That'll help. That all looks good. There's choke. They all look good. No binding with any of them. And throttle. Yep, all looks good. I'm gonna do some cleanup of the pieces that I know I didn't use, and then I'll grab the new parts that we need so we can start installing this. Well, unfortunately, I forgot to put 3 of the fuel tubes in. So I gotta take a bunch of this stuff off and fix it. There is an O-ring in there. And I have 2 extra O-rings, so I assume that's where they're supposed to go. Get this in, maybe enough. Next, I'm going to put in slides and all their pieces. So here's the jetting kit that I got. So a good starting position is E-clip in groove number 2 from the top. This is the drill, which I'm not going to do. Put 2 washers on top of the needle as well. All stock spacers. Install the washers above the E-clip, 2 per needle. So let's double check all the needles are the same. They'll say DynoJet 331. Be careful not to drop these. And then it says 2 washers on top. And then that goes into one of the slides. Washers on top. Let me screw in. Good. Needle's still moving. That's how I prefer it. And then these go on top. That looks good. Make sure that's snug. All right, so it goes down with the open end. Goes in there. That's seated now. All right, and then we've got this. It sits down in there. And we repeat. And 2, I think it's the only one I cleaned. That's the one that feels the worst. Those are all good. And really the last step is going through those and putting in all the jets, the floats, and everything else we need. All right, so I cleaned up a bit. So now we can start putting the bowls back on the carburetor. Right, you can see some of the bowls are going to the left, some of them are going to the right. So we'll just line them up like that. And that'll make it easy so that we know where it goes. So first we need the diaphragm for the accelerator pump. I made sure that I already cleaned this out and made sure that this is flowing properly. There's nothing gunked up there because that will affect acceleration. So same thing here. I've already blown this out and made sure this was all clear and clean. So this sits right into there. Got the spring that sits on top, and then we've got this that then screws in, and we have new screws for each of these. Those are on tight. And then we'll just have to make sure that when we're attaching this O-ring goes in there. The spot for the accelerator pump right here, because it's going to sit up against this. When the throttle is pulled, it's going to push down and it's going to spray fuel. So let's see if we can get this a little cleaner. All those two look clean. Good. And this is going to screw down. I think it's a 7. It is. Okay. Doesn't even need to be that tight. We've got the main jet is the jet that screws into the emulsion tube, then screws into the carb casting. So the 100 screws in there, just snug. 174. So this does allow more fuel. It may be better to use. Drop that down. Needle from this set. Also have our old needle. They look identical. So let's use the new ones. And we need to grab the springs that go with them. And then we need the washer and then the O-ring. Washer goes on first, and then the O-ring. So the spring doesn't strip the O-ring, damage it. Okay, one more like that. And then we will thread this until it hits. All right, this says, carefully turn the mixture tabs clockwise until lightly seated and turn back out 2.5 turns. All right, 2.5 turns on all of them. Also got these we have to install. Accelerator pump goes here. That means we're using these. We just need to make sure we don't mess up the O-ring. This one is more tricky to get on. There we go. Still a little clean in there. And screw it in until it seats. Got the gasket that goes on. Gasket looks like it's good size. And then the tricky part is flipping this over. Should close nicely. I got the carbs back together, so everything is screwed in. So I was able to get the carbs back together. One thing that I did notice though, the accelerator pump is not working properly. It looks like when you simulate the throttle, the accelerator pump does not come down like it's supposed to. So when you do this, it's supposed to push down on the accelerator pump, and this is not working properly. So I'm going to split the carb again, and then I'm going to take a look to see if we need to grease or we need to clean out this mechanism. We'll spray some carb cleaner where it was. We'll make sure any debris is removed. Okay, it's moving better now. Put a little lightweight oil in here, and then we'll slide the cotter pin back in. Carbs should be in fully working order now. We can do last couple double checks. Make sure it choke's working properly. Yep, that looks good. Looks like everything is lining up and working properly. Wonderful. All right, so it does look like maybe at some point a couple things were bent in here, so I did my best to bend them back so that nothing is contacting this rod. What I am gonna do is I want a little more tension on this, and there's no new spring in any of the kits that I bought. So what I'm gonna do is take 2 nuts, and I'm gonna use them as spacers to increase the tension on this spring. And then I'm gonna put a washer on top, and then I'll put the cotter pin back in. And I think that is going to give me the action that I want out of the accelerator pump. So as I push down on this, looks like I do get the response that I want on the accelerator pump. And it doesn't look like we're contacting anywhere. If I do need to remove these nuts, it'll be a quick fix from the bottom of the carb. So no problem there. So next step is to fill the carb with gas, make sure it's not leaking anywhere, and making sure that the accelerator pump works properly. So next, I'm gonna fill the carbs with gasoline. This is non-ethanol fuel, so it'll help keep the carbs a little cleaner. And then I'm gonna see if there's any leaks. All right, so we'll start filling up the carbs. Still filling up, still filling up. All right, so it looks like there's some gas leaking. All right, so it looks like it's coming out of carb number 2. Now the issue could just be the float needs a little tap. All right, almost all the accelerator pumps are working except the accelerator pump on bank 6. So also what we should do is test the float. Yep, it does look like it doesn't have any holes in it. So that's good. Okay, float pin looks like it's working. And let's make sure there's no debris or anything that would be preventing it from sealing. Nope, it looks like it does seal properly. We'll just make sure there's nothing in here to be affecting it. The last thing I will do with the float I will just bend this down ever so slightly. And then that little adjustment may be our fix. Put the pin back in. We can put our float bowl back on. And actually, let's double check and make sure. That there's nothing getting in the way of this sealing all the way. Make sure all the threads look okay. And we'll screw this back in. Let's ensure this seats properly inside the bowl. And let's run a test real quick. Let's ensure it holds gas. Does look like a little bit of gas is coming out. It's all clean inside of here. Let's screw this back in. Yeah, it still looks like it's leaking out of this bowl. All right, we'll have to try a different screw. I'm just going to swap one of these from one of the other bowls and see if it makes any difference. It's still leaking. So my assumption is it could actually leak from multiple places. It could leak from this hole here, or it could leak around here. So I'm only going to fill it up to here, and let's see if it leaks. All right, so I have just the bottom hole covered. Let's see if it leaks. Doesn't look like it. So now let's fill it up a little bit higher. Let's see now. Yep, it is leaking. So it must be from around this. So it's leaking pretty significantly. All right, so it has nothing to do with the float. Everything to do with the bowl. So that's the issue. There is a split right down this. So this is where it's coming in. So we either need to try and repair this or we need a new bowl. I'm going to attempt a repair to this crack with solder. Solder's supposed to work and it's supposed to be gas resistant. So we'll give that a shot. If that doesn't work, then we could always try a brazen rod, or we could just get a replacement float bowl. So I'm gonna make sure it's clean. So let's see if we can solder. Let's start up at the top. So it does look like we were able to go all the way down. All right, give that a sec to dry, and then we'll see if it can hold fuel. So it does look like it went all the way down to the bottom, but the only way to tell is to fill it up with gas. Still don't see any fuel coming out. It's a good sign. All right, I think we're in luck. So we'll give this a shot. If we find we are leaking from this float bowl, I'll probably buy a replacement. I think we're good. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to test each of the accelerator pump nozzles, which is in each of the cylinders. They're all connected via these fuel tubes, and the accelerator pump diaphragm sits here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna blow air down through this hole, and then it's gonna blow air through each one of the nozzles. And then I'll ensure that this is actually clear and I can feel air out of it, because I should be able to feel air out of the nozzles on each one. So I'm gonna run through this. Yep, so it looks like I can feel air coming out of all of the nozzles. So I'll put it back together, I'll fill it with fuel, and then we'll test everything again. All right, here's the second test of filling the carbs with non-ethanol gasoline. Let's see if we have any leaking. All right, gasoline's starting to flow. I put shop towels underneath, so it's very easy to see if there's any leaks. All right, I'm getting leaking out of carb number 3. I'll give this a little tap. Give it a chance to stop. And then we'll give the accelerator pump a test. Yep, all of them are working. Perfect. So now we just have to see if the leak is really fixed. I'm gonna start running gas again, just not real fast. All right, I see fuel coming out of 3 again. It does look like it's coming out of the overflow. So I don't have to empty all the carbs. I'm just going to take the bowl off 3, and we'll see if there's any issues with the bowl itself. All right, so I was trying to figure out what was wrong with number 3, and it looks like the float itself is bent. So I'm going to bend it back, and then I need to make sure that it floats properly. All right, so that was probably what the issue was. They were just a little bent, but now they both look good. I can put this back on, and then we can try again. Because it does look like this is holding gas, no problem. So that's good. So it does look like this float has a little bit of damage. I need to test it and make sure that it actually floats and doesn't fill up with gasoline. Don't see any bubbles coming from it. Let me try flipping it over. Yeah, it looks like it's okay. So no bubbles coming from it. So this float is good. I don't hear any water or gasoline inside it either. So another good sign. Here is the third attempt. Let's fill them up and see if they're leaking. And it really should only be bank 3. All right, looks like it stopped. It does look like I'm getting a little out of 3. I'm gonna stop this, lift this up. Let's see what 3 is doing. It may have been some leftover, so I'm gonna fill up. We keep filling. We don't see any leaks. I'm gonna turn the flow up just to see if too much gas causes it to start leaking. I think we're still okay. So let me check. Slides again. Slides all look good. We're getting a little out of 1, well, a little out of 6. All right, when I shake them, I do get some fuel out, so that's fine. All right, so let's test accelerator pump again. Yep, all of them are working. Very nice. I'll turn off the fuel. I think we're at a good spot. We can now get these back on the bike. They'll hold fuel, and then we can see if the jetting is correct.